Functionally, what's the difference between a non-binding LOI and the CAB APA from the standpoint of protecting the seller from time wasted on non-serious buyers within the contingency period?
So the LOI is just a faster document to put together. It doesn't contain all the reps and warranties. A lot of the buyers don't want to have their attorneys draft or review an APA, and so they're more comfortable. Um, Let me put it this way. There's a lot of buyers now that are taking courses or buying courses from online influencers that are telling them how to buy businesses with $0 down and all kinds of other nonsense. So in an LOI, if you're going to do an LOI for a buyer, one of the things I require, because LOIs are non-binding, usually they don't want a deposit on there or anything else. And so at least the CAB LOI does not have an exclusivity provision. And if they tell me, oh yeah, I want to add an addendum that has, an exclusivity for the next 120 days, it's like, fine. I won't even talk to the seller about that, or well, I might because I'm obligated to under California law, but basically any exclusivity, they need to show me bank statements, proof of funds, stock portfolio, whatever, bank letter saying they're pre-qualified for lending. I want to see that they have the ability to close the deal before they're allowed to tie up the seller's business. And the other thing is if the due diligence period is 30 days, then the exclusivity is 30 days. I mean, we want that exclusivity as minimal as possible, if it's granted at all. And then usually I just tell depending on the type of business, if it's smaller Main Street business, what happened and where those exclusivity provisions came from is middle market and lower middle market, where they're going out and they're getting a quality of earnings report done. And the quality of earnings report is going to cost maybe $30,000. And so the buyer is saying, hey, I'm going to go spend $30,000 on this. So I don't want you to be able to sell the business to somebody else while I'm waiting for my quality of earnings report, because then I'm just out of pocket 30 grand for no reason. So that's kind of where the exclusivity came about. And so as far as the LOIs go, honestly, on Main Street businesses, I really try to get the buyers to go straight to a purchase agreement, because there's really no reason to negotiate an LOI just to turn around and negotiate a purchase agreement on a small
And
Main Street.
the APA doesn't really seem to have any teeth where, they're during the contingency period, the buyer can just walk away. There's no claim to the earnest money deposit. They can just make up some excuse and go elsewhere, which
Yeah.
seems kind of functionally like, you know, there's if they're just trying to get a look under the hood, there's no real difference between the two
Yeah.
from that standpoint, unless I'm
From
missing
that
something.
standpoint, no, I mean, and I no, you're spot on, because in the asset purchase agreement, they have contingencies for lease, they have contingencies for financing, they have contingencies for due diligence. And if the business is such that they're getting an SBA loan, um, lenders' requirements and lenders' conditions, you can put whatever numbers in there that you want as far as those contingencies go. But the bottom line is, if the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy, half of the time those are going to move out, because the lease assignment, maybe you got 45 days for a lease assignment, but then the landlord says, oh, my attorney's out of town, on vacation or whatever, can't get it back to you, or doesn't get it back to you. So is the seller going to just say, hey, you didn't get me the lease assignment, within the 45 days, so I'm going to kill the deal, I'm going to terminate the deal? I mean, most sellers, if they truly want to sell, they're not going to do that. The buyer, if the buyer truly wants to buy, there's going to be communication going back and forth, and everybody's going to know where everything stands, and you might have to write a couple of extensions to extend out the due diligence, to extend out the lease. Financing contingency, I mean, that generally doesn't get released until the bank actually funds the loan. And when the bank funds the loan, they're not going to do that unless all the conditions have been cleared. And so at that point, you're closing the next day. So yeah, I mean, the buyer's contingency goes basically through the entire length of the agreement. And the only time that changes is, I have had situations where a buyer was having difficulty obtaining financing, all that, and the seller got impatient with it and just said, look at, I'm going to extend it only till this date. And then if they don't come through, then I'm canceling the agreement. It's like, okay, you know, fair enough. But the seller can cancel if those contingencies aren't met. So,
Tanya, I was going to
yeah.
ask, is it a fair statement that if you do have an LOI executed, in other words, the seller also signed off on that, if
Yeah.
someone else does come in, you really do need to inform them that you're going to be in a backup position, that there is an active LOI in place? Is that?
I mean, I would say it depends on the circumstances. So, because your seller also, there is an active LOI, but in a purchase agreement, your seller also is able to do due diligence on the buyer. And so similarly in an LOI, you've got a due diligence period. So that applies generally to both buyer and seller. So if the seller and the buyer are having conversations and the seller is getting the sense that this buyer is not the right fit, is going to completely run the business into the ground, this is just not going to work. Or Johnny, didn't you have a situation where the landlord said absolutely no, they absolutely were never going to rent to this particular buyer? They wouldn't sign a lease with this particular buyer?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so at that point, if you know you're never going to be able to satisfy the contingencies, then and you have another LOI or another offer that's been submitted, I'd just take it directly to the seller and say, hey, we can't accept this yet until this other one is done, canceled, terminated, whatever. But we've got this thing, here's another opportunity that might be a better fit.
I mean,
So
regardless, I mean, the point is, does the second LOI person have to be notified that there is an active LOI in place? Or are you saying no, you can run them in parallel with each other?
no, you would definitely, well, on an LOI, most of them say that you would actively be working towards a definitive purchase agreement. So yeah, you would the second
Right.
person, the second LOI, you would definitely have to let them know that there
Yeah.
is an active LOI. And
I
I
mean,
would, from a seller standpoint, before the seller signs that, they might sign it subject to cancellation of the first
right.
LOI or something like that. But yeah, definitely would have to be
Yeah, because the
disclosed.
fear is you don't want a second person finding out that there was an LOI in place the whole time, because that's going to really ruin your reputation as
Yeah,
far as
I mean,
professional.
I think that the truth of the matter is when I have an LOI on something and they're in due diligence or whatever, and I'm continuing to market and I'm continuing to get inquiries, I let them know right from the get-go that, by the way, we have an active LOI on this currently, but we don't have a definitive purchase agreement yet. But yeah, I do that right from the beginning with buyers, because some of them you're going to tell them, hey, I have an active LOI, and they're going to say, well, then I don't even want to waste my time looking at, going through this. I'm going to go look for something else. Let me know if it falls out. Like, okay, that's fair. Try and be respectful of everybody's time.
Functionally,